So you could have came anywhere for a bunch of textbook information about what RMF is. You could have Googled it. You could have looked at forums. Or you could have gone to a very expensive course that you found to learn all about RMF. Of course, once you pass all your certifications, you finish the schools, you finish going to all those fancy courses and reading all the books, then you have to get a job. And when you show up to that first job, everyone in RMF does things a little differently at different places. Everyone's got their own, let's say, flavor of doing it. So for this video, we're going to call it Practical RMF. Practical because this is when you get a job as an ISSO and you show up for your first day at work and you're looking around and you go, what do I do? This video is going to help you with that. And before we get going, I want to point out that everything in this course is information you can Google. If you were hoping for anything you couldn't pull off of a quick Google search, you were barking up the wrong tree. So, what is RMF? RMF stands for Risk Management Framework. And it is the policies, procedures, and processes that the government is going to use to secure its information systems. Meaning, if you have a bunch of networks or servers or even just workstations on a standalone isolated network running off of a local domain controller that you VM'd off of a Raspberry Pi. If you're wondering how to secure the network, keep the Chinese out of it, or to keep anyone out of it, any of the APTs, this is how you're going to do it. RMF is going to provide you all the step-by-step guidance and very clear configurations that you're going to put in to try to make your systems as secure as you can. And then when you can't follow all the processes and procedures, because hey, life happens and every network's a little different. Sometimes maybe you can't put a configuration onto that server because, well, it might break the server. In those instances, you have processes and steps you can follow to accommodate for that and try to add as much security as you can despite that flaw being present. RMF is going to fall into 6 categories. And there's a 7th category that people tend to forget about, but the 6 major categories are going to be categorize the information system, select your security controls for step 2. Step 3 is going to be implement your security controls. Step 4 going to be access security controls. Step 5, authorize information systems. Step 6 is monitor security controls. The last step is always the one that people think about in hindsight because it's always the one that people forget to do. Prepare. So, if you said it in the correct order, 1 would be prepare, or the hindsight step that people tend to forget to do. 2, which people often categorize as 1, so subtract 1 from all these would be categorize, select for 3, 4, implement, 5, access, 6, authorize, and 7, monitor. Now, it could bore you with all the nitty-gritty details on each individual one of these steps, but a video on that, it could be a whole video in itself. So instead, we're going to skip past that, and I'll throw up a quick graphic for people who want to see that. More importantly than memorizing a bunch of charts or reading all these textbooks is really thinking the bigger question of why are we doing all this? Why do we even care about RMF? That's the big question. Standardization for security is probably one of the big reasons, in my opinion. Following industry best practices is another. Guidance, because without the standardization of everyone following the same security methods. I don't know if you ever worked in a big organization, but there are a lot of times where you go to one department who does things one way and another department that does some security totally different. And one department might do something, fantastic. They might secure all of their servers and networks and applications in a fantastically secure industry best manner. Meanwhile, John Doe in the corner over there, who is his first sysadmin job, not doing so great, or maybe he doesn't care about security. Maybe he cares more about getting the operational everything done, and everything's the biggest priority. So if he has to open up a couple of ports and protocols, or open up some holes in that firewall, or even allow some applications that he probably shouldn't, he's going to do, because that's going to be the quickest way to get his customers happy and to get his phones to stop ringing. But in doing that, he's not really following industry best practices. There's no standardization across a network, and hackers know that if they can get in one part of the network, they can probably sidestep and get into other parts through domain trusts and other ways. Hackers can get in through the weakest point of the security in an entire organization and then start working their way in. So standardization, following those best practices and making them all standardized, making sure that everyone, even the new guy, even John Doe sitting in the corner, first admin job in the whole world, making sure that guy's got some guidance, that maybe he shouldn't put Angry Birds game on so-and-so's laptop because General so-and-so said that was what they wanted to do with their free time. That's not the greatest way to go about security. The last thing, which people I think should probably talk about more because it is important, although it does kind of get laughed at, is when something goes wrong, we have to know how it went wrong, why it went wrong, how can we prevent this from happening in the future? And then, of course, if money's involved, like anything, insurance and butt covering and finger pointing is going to happen. So making sure that everyone's got their ducks in a row, so when that finger pointing starts happening, the finger's not pointing at you. And here in this course, we're going to talk about some RMF and some ways to go about some best practices for cybersecurity, so that if God forbid something does happen, your butt's covered. And more importantly, that the network's secure. Don't forget that part. Okay, so it's your first job. You just got your new ISSO RMF job, and any cyber job working with RMF. And you show up to work and you want to start securing that network. What are you going to do? Well, step one, you're going to start looking at EMAS. And the reason you're going to use EMAS is because EMAS makes everything a lot prettier than looking at NIST 800 anything. Quick Google search, jump on NIST and start looking through any of the 800 series documentation. As soon as you get to NIST 853 and your eyes start to bleed, let me know. Pause the video, come back. No, nobody's got time for that. It's hard to read. So we use EMAS. It's a way to look at RMF and security control packages. Your package is your network or your system or your groups of networks and systems. Now, you're going to have security controls. Security controls are broken up into families. Families such as, let's say, a family about physical security, or a family about incident response, or a family about, pick a cyber-related issue, access control. These are all different cybersecurity families. Each one of them, as an example in physical security, is going to ask you a series of questions. The questions are referred to as assessment procedures. Assessment procedures are sub-questions within a security control. You answer 4 or 5 assessment procedures, and you've answered one security control. An example of an assessment procedure could be, did you lock the doors at night? Did you make sure to sign people in or sign them out? Is there an access roster? Is any of this stuff verifiable? These are all things that you have to ask when doing an RMF package. Now, the physical controls are really easy to explain, but access controls, as we just mentioned earlier, are another security control family where you could ask questions like, hey, is that guy supposed to be in here? Or does he have the right accounts or permissions to do what he's doing? Does he have too much? Too little? Is he authorized? Does anyone check that guy's background? There's lots of other security controls talking about configurations and everything regarding. So everything's broken up into families, and once you've answered all the assessment procedures, you've answered all the security controls, and you've answered all the security families, hey, you're one step closer to being secure with your RMF package. So the big question becomes, how do I answer an assessment procedure? Well, there's three methods. You could either test, interview, or examine. Examine. This is the easiest, I think, to explain to people. Examine is, if the security control or the assessment procedure is asking for, let's say, a policy or a record. Like, is there a policy that they lock their doors at night? Is there a record that they log people in when they come in or out or escort people into secure spaces? Sure, let's go look for those records. Examine. It's a really easy way to say, I'm just going to go look at their records. I'm going to see what they got going on. You can review their policies, review their procedures. It's a lot of reading and digging in to see what's going on in the organization. Interview. This one's, again, pretty straightforward. I'm going to go find some admin. I'm going to go find a member of the organization. We're going to play 20 questions. I'm going to ask them, so when you guys leave, do you lock the doors? For access control, do you have people checked every now and then? Does everyone here have their certifications? And how often do you do your organizational training? Are there TTPs or SOPs or, for that matter, any kind of procedures of how you do your job? And hopefully, when I do those interviews, the admins or the organizational members are going to turn around and say, yeah, of course, we got that written over here in a binder. Or, yeah, that is written right here on the door. Or, of course we do that. I know how to do that process or procedure. Let me show you. And you can watch them do it and verify and shoulder surf or look at their policies. Interview. Pretty straightforward. And then test. Test is bittersweet. And the reason for that is because you start getting into what's called CKL files. Now, CKL files are referring to something called STIGs. What's a STIG? A Security Technical Implementation Guide. They come out from DISA. They're published regularly. You can go to a publicly available website to look at all the guidance and stuff, and what they are, for the vast majority of them, it's configurations. You're looking at configurations on systems, networks, servers, workstations, everything under the sun. And these are configurations that you can check and audit, sometimes through automatic means and sometimes through manual means. There are thousands of configurations that you have to check and run scans for. We have tools to check for various configuration set and STIG compliance. And we check all those things through tools that eventually lead to what's called a .ckl file. And that's a file extension for the type of file. What it is a green check or a red mark that a configuration is there or not. Is it in compliance? Did the admin find something off? Was it kind of in compliance? Like maybe they had a configuration set in one place, but not in others. How many of these scans did they run across various machines over their entire vast organization? And you're going to get a file for all of these machines. the reason why this is bittersweet for a lot of ISSOs is because you have to get these files from other organizations, departments, people, admins. In some organizations, you can run them yourselves. And in some places, the belief is that that causes a conflict of interest. Now, that's a debate for another time. But when you are running an RMF audit, you have the option of examining, interviewing, and testing. Testing will probably take the longest. However, if you're in a great organization where things are automated and you get your scans and stuff on time, or if you're not the one running the scans, the CKL files are sent to you in a timely manner or stored in a central location that you can access, it's real easy for everyone involved to say, hey, let's see if maybe this network router or this group of servers, are they in compliance with these STIGs over here, these configurations? Let's check that. Once you do, you can say, yeah, it has been checked. And then you get to answer those assessment procedures as yes, with all the details of why you thought yes. Maybe provide some kind of evidence. In fact, providing evidence for an assessment procedure is called an artifact. And it's how you're going to prove, more than just your word, that something's secure. And don't forget, earlier we talked about butt covering. When something hits the fan or something that doesn't smell great hits the fan, you definitely want to be the one who has the audit trail showing that not only did you inspect with examinations and you interviewed all the proper people and you got all the everyone who was supposed to say that they did their job, they verbally said and they told you they did their job, but also that you have the configuration check file showing that you audited all those things to make sure everything was done in accordance. So if, God forbid, something does happen, your butt's covered. Okay, so let's say in an instance that there's an assessment procedure and you just cannot do whatever it is that that assessment procedure wants you to do. Let's say there's a configuration, or even simpler. Let's say there's a door that has to be locked. What if you can't lock the door? If you physically cannot lock that door, like the doorknob is broke and there's a work order to fix it, but for some reason you're in a location where maybe we can't fix the door for the next 5 months. Okay, well, that's a really good situation where you got to have a conversation about that. You can't just leave the door unlocked. You have to try to mitigate some of that risk. You don't want maybe the janitor coming in and stealing everyone's hard drives, but you still can't lock the door. So in that situation, we're going to go ahead and make a plan of actions and milestones. POAM for short. What it is just like the name suggests, it's a plan to try to mitigate that risk and fix it as soon as you can with milestones to work towards the goal of eventually being in compliance with that assessment procedure, but you can't do it right now. But what happens if you can't lock that door? Ever. For whatever reason, you can never, ever lock the door. Let's say, I'm going to make something up here. What if they built a brick wall in front of, it's part of that door, and now half that door is a brick wall, and you still got to leave it open because it's the only way in and out of the building. Crazy example, I know. But in that situation, if you cannot follow the assessment procedure, we do have a solution for that. We have an AORNA. AORNA stands for AO, the authorizing the authorizing officer. I'm gonna go with officer. Final answer. Hey, this video is free. Risk acceptance, which means the AO is going to accept the risk permanently. In that situation, you've explained it to everyone under the sun. You've tried to mitigate the risk as much as you can, but you are never going to be able to put a door where that brick wall now is. So we're going to accept the risk. And in that situation, we're going to try to mitigate the risk as much as we can, but you're never going to be able to fully satisfy that control. For the POAMs, like I just said, you're going to try to mitigate the risk. POAMs, you're going to work towards eventually putting that door back there. And in the meantime, maybe we put a couple of guards in front of the door, or maybe we barricade it every night and we barricade the door with a big giant lock every night until that door is eventually fixed. And then once the door is fixed, then hey, we're in compliance, the POAM's done, and we're all happy-dory, hunky-dory. All right, I'm rambling, and this video is going on way longer than I would have liked it to. But in short, POAMs are when you're not in compliance with an assessment procedure, but you have a plan, a strategy, a timeline to get it within compliance. AORNAs are when that's never going to happen, whether it be because of money, some other existential circumstances, or just because... No, that's about it. Unless somebody with a bunch of stars on their collar says, we just ain't ever going to do that because I said so. And if that's the case, submit it up to the AO, and he'll take that under consideration, and maybe you'll get a risk acceptance. Man, I stuttered. Just because somebody said so. Rare case, but it does happen. And that's it. That broad stroke and summarizes pretty much every RMF textbook or news article you're going to find on the internet or anywhere else for that matter, any fancy course. You're going to show up as a new ISSO or new cyber person, or to any organization performing RMF. You're going to say, hey, boss, what are we doing today? They're going to say, we're going to work on these security packages. You're going to go through security controls, and step one, you're going to start looking at all the policies and procedures. You're going to find out if they're doing the right thing, and if not, you have a lot of STIGs and guidance to maybe implement the right way of doing things. If you're not sure for a policy perspective, the good news is whenever you go to look at those DISA sites where those STIGs are, they have what's called SRGs. And SRGs are guidance, security guidance. And that security guidance is going to help you write policies and procedures to point you in the right direction for your organization to implement the best security possible. As a ISSO or RMF practitioner, you're going to start by helping the policies get in the right direction. Then you're going to review STIGs and get the checks in the right direction. You're going to interview people, and you're going to make sure and try to guide everyone as much as you possibly can to implement the best security possible in a standardized, methodical, step-by-step way. And you're going to try to take as much care as you possibly can to get your organization as secure as you can possibly make it by following standardized practices that are step-by-step. They're methodical. They go into great detail, more so than anybody just off the street would come up with playing 20 questions. And at the end of the day, the reason why you're getting paid by your organization is to assist them in getting the best possible cybersecurity, while also taking into consideration like operation environments or money. Money's a big one. And then they're paying you not because every day you're having a cyber incident where you have to go to battle with hackers left and right, like maybe some blue teams do, but they're really paying you for your knowledge of the RMF process, the standardized, methodical method of taking a defense in-depth approach to cyber security. Not just layering your security, but really taking a individual step-by-step approach and taking the time to secure your organization. That concludes this video, and thank you for listening.